Okay, so step one is pre-drill holes for these 5/8 metal screws. So we've got these are going to come up from underneath and come into the capping that we've just developed here. This capping is going to, before we screw them on, we're going to use a product called M1 caulking. We're going to put that down and then we'll hold it as we go around the shape of the pool and screw from the bottom up. Later on these could probably come out, but you won't be able to because the cover strip is going to go on top of that. We're just going to put the caulking on, which is this M1 material, which is not a lot of things want to bond to our polyurea. So M1, which we'll show you later, is great for this. So we're just going to put a bead of this on the inside and a bead of this on the outside. It's not too hot today. If it was really hot, you might just have to do it in 2-foot runs. Otherwise it might skin over. We'll butt up against the steps here. We'll have it overhanging, just say 1/2 inch this side, and we're ready to screw. The screws will help as we bend it, and then as time goes, the M1 will dry. Okay, so what we've got to do on these bracings, in this case, in this pool, there's about 7 of them. So we've got some treated wood, 2x4s, and we've cut them down to put them here. Okay, and we've screwed them here, screwed through the side here into that. Got the other one. This is actually just hanging in the wind at the moment. This is going to go over this. The top of it just fits under here. And then in between these here, we'll cut some paneling and it'll get screwed onto this and it'll cover that seam up nice and neat, as long as you cut straight. Okay, so I've marked my line here. It's at the distance that I'm hoping is right. I've got to cut straight so it butts up with the cover strip. Okay, so I'm going to cut just with this knife. You could use a little oscillating power tool. You could use a circular saw. Whatever you use, just be careful because there's parts of it that's really easy to cut and your knife slips through it or your saw cuts through it really easy, and there's parts that's not. So just be careful. The main thing is to cut along the line so later on it lines up perfect over there. As you're cutting, pull away or get someone to pull away on the piece you're cutting from the bigger piece, and it makes it a lot easier. Okay, so the metal wall going around the top rim is double thick in places and single thickness in other places. So I'm just going around looking for the single thickness areas, screwing that on, and then other areas which maybe are protruding a little further than I want, we'll come back like Robert's doing there with the drill, pre-drilling through the 2 levels of steel and then screwing. So that's another way to sort of tie it all the way back so it doesn't encroach outside the capping edge. Yes. Nice. Okay, so we're going to join the panels here. Panel continues on this way, We'll cut around the fitting here. With that being said, we've got a join here, so the product expands and contracts a bit like everything else. So what I want to do is screw that right onto the timber, and then later we could put a cover strip. Don't always need to. If we screw a lot of screws down both sides of that, and that'll finish that off quite nice. But we do also make these cover strips. What we'll do with these screw heads that are everywhere, we'll go over them. This is colored with crushed rock and sand. There's no paint. We'll touch up these with some bit of silicone and some crushed rock, and you won't know they're even there. In this case, we've got a join here, so I'm just going to show you what you've got to do with the join. There's a couple of options. One is you just run some silicone, clear silicone down the joint, and then here's some colored powders, which is the same colored crushed rock that was colored, the rock panels are colored with. There's no paint on any of this. Okay, so we get our silicone gun, we put a nice big bead. At the same time, we can go over our screw heads here, and we put this like this all the way over here. Go over these screw heads. Be quite generous. Okay, if it's a real hot day, you might only do 1 or 2 feet at a time, otherwise it skins over, and then the powders with the paintbrush don't adhere really, really well. So just consider that. Okay, then we touch our brush into the powders, and just take your time, little bit by little bit. We've got some grey in here and we've got some black in here. So the first thing we're doing is we're pushing the brush into the powders, which gets stuck onto the powders get stuck onto our brush, and then we push it on here. That acts as a bit of a release agent to start with, so that the powders, the brush bristles don't go all the way through and touch the silicone. So we just do quickly the first process. Okay, so now we've got that covered. We want it to blend in more into the rockwork, so we've got to push a little harder. The same thing, you're still got to have a lot of powders. Don't be afraid too, if it's a little high, just brush it down with your finger. Make it flatter against the rock. Okay. Later on you can wash that off and the excess when it's dry. Okay, got a little bit more to do down here. Okay, I'll finish that and then I'll come along and I'll put this strip on. So you've got the choice. If you feel you've done a good enough job there, you don't need one of these strips. Okay, so be quite generous putting that on. As I said, just smear it with your finger back and forth. Dab into the powders. Okay, if you stand back and you don't like it, okay, let it dry. Blow it all off, wash it off, let it dry again and go again. Okay, you get a few times at it, but typically it's pretty easy to do after you've done it a few times. Okay, so here we are, we've touched it up. Let's say you don't like it. Okay, I will just say there's a bit of expansion and contraction with the panels, depending on summer and winter and what time of the day it is and whatnot. If you don't like it, you want to just forget that. Hey, why don't I just cover it? Okay, so you're just going to put this all the way up to the top. Obviously, make sure it's level, and then grab some decking screws, 1-inch decking screws. Okay, I really should have a level here, and then screw in. Okay, now if you had a staple gun too, that's a great tool to use as well. So now again the silicone. Okay, so this is a capstone for the cobblestone panels. When you go around fairly tight radius, the gap opens up quite big. you can't put the silicone on in one go and expect it's not going to sag. So I just put some on there before, let that cure a little bit. Now I'll just do some more, and then I can dab the brush into that and it won't squash it too much. Okay, so I'll put that down, just gently touch this flat. Okay. Grab our powders, dab our brush into that. Oh, we might just make that a little neater there. You got to dab sooner or later hard enough that it embeds into the silicone. And later on you can blow and wash that off.